Hello and welcome to this week's Business News Wales Weekly Business Review with me, Carwyn Jones, looking at all the issues that have affected the business community in Wales over the past 7 days. I'm delighted to be joined once again by four guests who are familiar to our listeners. First of all, Kellie Beirne. Kellie, welcome back.
Sorry, I was on mute. Good evening, everyone.
Right, and a very festive Robert Lloyd Griffiths, who sits in front of us with his red fleece, celebrating Christmas. Robert, good to see you back.
Good to see you, Carwyn, as always.
Okay, and we have Ian Price. Ian, good to see you once again. You almost have a halo on my screen. There's a light just above your head, but it's not quite the halo, so you're not quite ready for that yet, but good to see you back.
Yeah, and it is a halo, actually. So,
and of course, Alwen Williams, across Noel, Alwen, always good to have Alwen on the programme as well, and good to have you all on. The first thing I have to say is I feel slightly humbled by the fact that I am sitting here in a lumberjack shirt while everyone else is dressed up for the occasion. So there we are. That's a lesson for me. No doubt I'll wear a dark business suit for the next podcast to find you all sitting there in t-shirts, but thank you for making the effort, even if I didn't. Well, this is the last podcast of the year. There's been one theme that's kept us going through the year. That's been COVID. Brexit, of course, the start of the year. If somebody had said to us all that Brexit would take a back seat to another issue, we'd all have been surprised. But let's look forward. We're entering the season of goodwill and trying to look forward to the future. Last week on the podcast, we dealt with investment opportunities, potential investment opportunities for the coming year. And of course, today has seen a landmark signing of the North Wales growth deal, another step in UK and Welsh governments working together, and of course with the local government and with stakeholders to put together a deal that will deliver, we all hope, for the north of our country, as the city regions have for Cardiff and Swansea. Now, Alwen, you're very familiar, of course, with the growth deal. Take us through what the growth deal might mean for people in the north, and how gratifying is it to see so many different people in different levels of government working together?
Yeah, absolutely. So gratifying to see. I think, there's been many comments made about the collaboration and the approach to working together, which I think has been fueled even more actually by COVID. The environment we found ourselves in being much more remote in the way we've had to work together. It's really helped to bring both governments and certainly my team in the region and the whole region in terms of stakeholders together to get this deal over the line. I think it's going to make a huge impact for North Wales. It is a long-term investment strategy, so we'll see the economy benefit for a long time because of the investment we'll make through the growth deal. And I think what's really compelling for us as a region on the growth deal is that it truly sort of devolves that decision-making power down to a local level. Nobody knows the local economy better than us. We live here. We see it every day. We've obviously experienced the significantly changing economy over the last 10 months. And we have a very different outlook now, I guess, both positive and challenging in terms of how we move forward. But today's a monumentous day for North Wales. We've signed the deal. It's been a process that many, many people have contributed towards over many years to get to today. So it's to be celebrated by many people, not least the citizens of North Wales. And I think that the programmes that we've selected, there are 5 key programmes for investment, and that's digital infrastructure, land and property, high value manufacturing, agri-food and tourism, and low carbon energy. I think those were programs were carefully thought out to address the market and to address the economy that we were in pre-COVID. But I think if you take each of those themes and you really test it against today's world, all of them are absolutely concrete and still so relevant in the post-COVID world, which just gives me a huge amount of confidence that the work that was done to define those programs was absolutely spot on. If it can be still as relevant after a global pandemic, then do you know what? That the investment program over the next 15 years looks like it's going to be a good one. So I think, you know, today is to be celebrated. We've made history in North Wales. Everybody's really pleased to have signed the deal, and we're still friends at the end as well. And I think that's to be commended as well.
Tell me, Alwen, how difficult was it to craft the deal for the North, given the fact that, you know, it's a common failing amongst people, you know, in the South to look at North Wales as one big amorphous mass. It's exactly the same. There's a world of difference between Shotton and Llanelch, isn't there, in terms of, you know, the demography, in terms of culture, in terms of industry.
Yeah.
How difficult was it to be able to deliver something that would touch all parts of the North, you know, regardless of their economic history and their social history?
Yeah, and there's a lot of disparity in the economy as well, you know, East versus West. I think because of the good collaboration we've had, we've been able to build a portfolio that does address that disparity, and with the whole purpose of inclusive economic growth. And I think, yes, it's been challenging, and you know, we're not going to be able to take every project into every community. But what we have done is looked at where it's possible to make an impact in every community. So some of the projects around digital infrastructure, for example, we know there are areas more in need of digital infrastructure investment, and those areas will be addressed through the program. So I think it gives a balanced approach to deliver that real inclusive economic growth, where every citizen in North Wales or every potential investor coming into North Wales will be able to say, I'm able to invest here because the growth deal did this and helped me to be able to invest. Or I can live my life better. I have access to more resources and facilities that I need because of the growth deal. So I think lots of careful thought went into crafting it, and it did. You know, it took a number of years to get it right as well.
Here's a question for you, given that it's Christmas. The north of Wales, where does it start, or from your perspective, where does it end? What's the boundary, do you think? The cop out is Dyfi Furnace, okay? That's the cop out if you're coming on the western coast.
I'm not sure how to answer that, to be honest. Is it a trick question?
You should be a politician. That's exactly the answer we needed. There we are. Never get involved in controversy if you can avoid it.
I don't want to upset anyone.
The correct answer is to say, well, that's an interesting question, but could I give you this answer instead?
Learning from a professional.
How dare you. Kellie, the Cardiff city region and the way that's worked out. I mean, it's sometimes, I mean, when I signed that's going back, Stephen Crabb, I think, was the Secretary of State, so going back a few years. What are you seeing in terms of the way it's been delivering in the city region?
Yeah, thanks, Carwyn. I mean, it's quite different to the growth deal, and many congratulations, Alwen. That's a fantastic outcome today. So, you know, absolutely brilliant. But our city deal, we have an open, wider investment fund, so we don't have any set programs or projects. The private sector, higher education, the community sector sort of submit investment propositions to us, which we then take through a process. And I think what we've tried to do is to balance our wider investment fund. So there's a package of measures which are led by the public sector, which serve all parts of the region. So Metro Plus, local sustainable transport schemes, a housing viability fund, an SME finance fund, a challenge fund. They serve a digital program, they serve everyone. And then through the wider investment fund, what regional cabinet does is then they have to make decisions about the best schemes that serve more targeted interests in the region. So, for example, just last week, Regional Cabinet approved a significant investment in Zipworld on the old Tower Colliery site up at Carwyn. A couple of weeks previous to that, it was an investment in a pharmaceutical company, a data healthcare company in Cardiff. Prior to that, there was another investment in another med tech company. You all know the history in terms of advanced compound semiconductors. We've got several bids into UK government for things like the Strength in Places programs. So it's evolving all of the time. And I think, we're going into a gateway review now, Carwyn. In fact, today we were given the dates for January, so fingers crossed. But looking back across the portfolio of projects, there's a real spread there. It is a true portfolio. And I think what I'm really looking forward to next year is beginning the evolution from being just a city deal into a city region. And I think some of the tools and instruments that both Welsh and UK government have put on the table, corporate joint committees, giving us much more power, a commitment to more radical decentralisation, the levelling up agenda, some of the research and development funds that we should be bringing into Wales, they will all continue to have a significant impact. So I look forward with some real hope and optimism.
You mentioned Tower Colliery then, Zipworld. That's a tremendous juxtaposition of, Zipworld so successful with Sean there, and Tower, of course, it was our last deep mine. It's in some ways a metaphor for how the economy has changed, isn't it?
I think, yeah, and as a city deal, we've got 10 local authorities, right from west to east. We're a big population. We've got to make it work for all parts of the region. We can't just invest in the tradable economy in our cities. We've got to invest in the foundational economy all across the region. It's got to be about embedded local wealth building. And I think there was a really important point that Alwen made about, I think the real benefit of regions is that you see things through the lens of place. We're much closer to those real world problems and citizens who are experiencing those issues and challenges. So I think, regions are really well able to enable, to be fleet of foot, to help de-risk, to be troubleshooters, and to convene around some of the big industrial, but also the society.
I went down Tower when it was a working mine. And it was quite unusual in the sense that the men, there were men, went down the shaft to work, but the coal came out the side, because in the deep mines, the coal went up the shaft rather than anywhere. But in Tower, there were conveyor belts everywhere rather than there being drams. And it was a long walk to the face. And on the way back, you could ride on the conveyor belts with your face flat in the coal. And up you went on the conveyor belts. And when I came out, of course, I was covered in coal dust. And showered and found that I could not get the dust out of my eyelashes. So I looked heavily mascaraed. And this wasn't a good look. So I was off to the next meeting. I had to ring my uncle, who'd worked underground in the Abernant pit, to ask him how to get the dust out of my eyelashes. Butter, incidentally. That's the solution to it.
I makeup remover, Carwyn, but if you want to go...
Yeah, I wasn't carrying it at the time, but it was easy to get.
Yeah, well, if you find...
The canteen in Tower Colliery.
Well, yeah, and as I say, as a team, maybe we should visit the Zipworld site and try out the facilities when it's opened.
I tell you what, I've seen the one in up in Bethesda, in the quarry there. It's tremendous. I didn't actually ride on it, but I've seen it from the top. And as someone who did a bungee jump some years ago in New Zealand, yeah, I'm up for that. Before
Carwyn, funnily enough, your Aberdeen story. When I married my wife, we moved back from Oxfordshire to Pontardawe.
I'm glad you married your wife here, I must say, no one else.
No, I mentioned that because she was my first wife. So. But sorry, but we moved back from Oxfordshire to Pontardawe, and of course Abernant was just down the road from Pontardawe, and my wife, who'd lived in Oxfordshire all her life, was mystified as to why these rough, tough men wandered around town with mascara on, because it was at the time of New Romantics, and of course
early 80s updates it,
yeah, the early 80s, and of course she couldn't understand why they weren't quite dressed like New Romantics, but they had the eye makeup. So I had to explain the same thing. It was the guys who worked at the Abernant, and it wasn't mascara at all. It was coal dust. But
no, well, there was a shortage of butter in Ponty compared to the plenty that we have now. Now that takes us in quite nicely to talk about Swansea, the Swansea city region, and the deal there. I mean, you mentioned it was Pontardawe that you went to live to begin with. I mean, what have you seen of the Swansea city region from your perspective and how it's worked?
Well, it's an interesting grouping, and I'm not entirely. Swansea seriously seems to be benefiting at the moment. You've only got to drive through Swansea at the moment, see the level of construction going on. You've got the digital arena being built, and everything that's going up around that. And to be fair to Rob Stewart and Swansea City Council, they really do seem to have sort of bought into it, and Swansea genuinely seems to be benefiting. And I think there's quite a lot going on in Carmarthenshire. But I'm not absolutely sure that other parts of the city deal are necessarily doing as well out of it at the moment as maybe some other region. Now, whether that will come with time, I don't know. But I'd like to see what's happened in Cardiff happen in Swansea. I think backing some of these projects is really positive, and that's the way forward. I think, investing in medtech companies, investing in Zip World, these are the things that maybe with the growth deals we can do. I was at a talk by Simon Hart on Monday at Cardiff Business Club, and he was mentioning the dreaded Shared Prosperity Fund, and he was mentioning he quite hoped to directly local authorities, and I'm just wondering whether that obviously there's a battle to be had on that, but whether the city regions or the city deals could be the vehicle then with which to distribute the Shared Prosperity Fund going forward. Look, Kellie's is perked up there, but certainly it was something he said, and you're right. I think what Kellie said, it's only closer to the people, and maybe then they'll have a better understanding of how it's invested. But I'll be interested to see. So there's definitely opportunities there, and quite clearly, when there's cash involved, it brings people together. If anybody would have told me that Anglesey and Wrexham would have been involved in the same deal about 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been astounded. But it's amazing what can be achieved when there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and I think that really helps and focuses people's minds. And I think the same thing applies elsewhere. We just have to make sure that, as Cardiff has done, that it's what benefits there are spread evenly.
Yeah, you mentioned Swansea. I worked in Swansea through the 90s, and it never changed. There was very little development in Swansea. Waterstones arrived, and that was pretty much it. But compared to what Swansea is now, it's incredible. You mentioned there, there's this argument about money going direct to local authorities. Is there a danger? Because there was an element of this with Objective One, I have to say, when I first saw it, that if you just give money straight to local authorities, unless you give them an incentive to work together, they won't. And you end up with very, very patchy provision in different parts of Wales. Is that a worry for you?
I think that's why the growth deals could be the better vehicle for it, because then you're distributing it for the benefit of the region rather than specific areas. And I think as a consequence, they're all going to pull together because they want to see the benefits of it evenly spread. I think there's a danger that if you give it directly to the local authorities and say they've all got their pet projects and they all go off and do their own thing. And really what you want to see is things that benefit the whole region. And I know we don't need any more nice street furniture or things like that. You know what I mean? We need to see some genuinely transformational projects. And I think there is an opportunity with the growth deals and what government is talking about with regional development corporations potentially as well, to see some real progress in respect to this.
Thanks, Ian. Robert, from your perspective, it's important clearly for business to see levels of government working together. The politics is not of interest to most businesses. What they want to see is delivery, isn't it? How important is it from your perspective that politics is left at the door for a time when we look at economic development, and that all levels of government work together?
Oh, I think, Carwyn, it's hugely important. I think Alwen's appraisal of today's momentous news from North Wales, of everybody working together, collaboration in partnership, and I think her end line, we're still getting on, is hugely important. And Kellie sees that day in, day out in terms of her work. And I think from IOD members' perspective, they welcome and encourage and always ask for governments to work together for the benefit of a common goal. And that's what we need, don't we, going forward into the new year when it's going to be very, very difficult. We're hoping we see light at the end of the tunnel, but the collaboration and the partnership and the working together, and you should say leaving politics at the door, is going to be absolutely essential so that we are very much in this together, and we need to come out of it together. It's been such a tough year. We've seen some amazing resilience from certain sectors and certain businesses. We've seen some amazing news today in North Wales and some collaborations that hitherto we wouldn't have expected, and people are getting on, and the business community does just knuckle down and get on with it wherever they possibly can. So I think we're going to see, if I have my crystal ball into next year, more collaboration, more working together, more cooperation, and as Ian said as well, learning from each other, from what's happening in North Wales to what's happening in Cardiff and Swansea City region. And I hosted a webinar yesterday looking at the opportunities in Mid Wales, massive opportunities with Aber innovation and activity that's taking place in some of the sectors we've already discussed. So huge opportunities throughout Wales, and I think we need to start talking up those opportunities, as Alwen and Kellie and Ian does so well, and I tried my very hardest to do at all times, because we're going to need some really good news next year, and to bang the drum and really talk about the opportunities that we can do and collectively get together and move forward out of this horrible year.
Yeah, the difficulty is this: is that the city deals and the growth deals have been a great example of different levels of government working together to a common set of priorities.
Yeah.
Difficulty with the shared prosperity fund, depending on how it's structured, is that the UK government tries to run to have its own priorities and its own fund. It'll be in competition with the Welsh government, and the rivalries will start up again, which nobody needs. And it's interesting to hear both you and Ian say that the city deals and the growth deals are a good vehicle for bringing everybody together around the table. Surely what we don't want is there to be an entirely separate scheme funded by the UK government that has its own priorities that runs parallel to any other scheme. And I know, and it, same for the Welsh government, actually. I mean, it wouldn't make sense from a Welsh government perspective as well. So having a deal that brings people together must surely be a sign of strength in terms of the way forward.
I think it's motherhood and apple pie. Who would disagree with that? Who would disagree with politicians
surprised?
leaving politics at the door and get on with it? But of course,
I always say to people in the world of business, don't assume the world of politics is as logical as the world of business.
But well, it's a different world, and one which we enter in our peril and do our best to keep out of, I would say, especially as we've got elections coming up. But you're absolutely right. Let's collaborate. Let's work together for the benefit of Wales as a whole, and let's implement policies that have the maximum benefit for economic prosperity. That's what we all want.
Yeah, well, no one can dispute that, and that level of cooperation is hugely important. Well, we're drawing to the end of the year. Christmas is upon us. What I'm going to ask you now is your hopes for the new year, really. I'll give you some time to think about it while I chat away for a bit. But three things you'd like to see. It could be anything. Could be the world of politics. Could be the world of business. Could be the world of sport. But as far as the three of you as individuals are concerned, what would you like to see happen in Wales? That's three things. What would you like to see happen in Wales over the course of this year? From your perspective, what would you like to see? Now, I've waffled on enough to give you time to think. I'm going to come back to you in the same order. So, Alwen, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, that was sneaky. I think what I'd like to see.
Say whatever you feel comfortable with.
I think more continuation of what we've seen in terms of behaviours because of COVID and lockdown. We've demonstrated that we're hugely adaptable as a country. And I think that needs to be celebrated. We've changed so much in terms of, doing things that are perhaps beyond our comfort zone. I think we should absolutely take that into next year, 2021, continue to be adaptable, avoid the temptation to go back to how things used to be, because now we have a new platform to play on. We have a much more agile way to do business, supported by digital technology that enables much more connections to happen, better environment, cleaner environment, many more conversations. And I think there's a balance there moving into 2021 when it's safe to do that. I would like to see us reach a satisfactory sort of deal with leaving the European Union. I think that's absolutely essential for the economy. It's something that there's still a lot of uncertainty around, and we're speaking on the 17th of December. So I think that it's a risk, but it's also an opportunity, and what can we do with it? How do we embrace it and move forward? I'm not sure if I've given 3 things there, but certainly those are the priorities for me.
We can be generous at Christmas and say, well, I wasn't counting, no problem. Kellie, what's your wish list for the coming year?
Well, I'll try and say different things to Alwen, because I agree with all of hers. But the first one, I think, Carwyn, in the same spirit, it's about building on the trust, the acceptance, and the high levels of engagement that we've built in the last year. And I think we've talked tonight about Shared Prosperity Fund and future programs. But I think if trust is embedded, relationships are good, money and programs will always follow clarity and sort of purpose. So I think that thing about trust is absolutely essential. Secondly, I say this all of the time, but investment in research and development, innovation, just the fact that we've got a multiplicity of vaccines coming out of the UK, the innovation that we've seen, we know what a knowledge economy can do and what it's capable of doing. So that has to be continued, absolutely, in my view. And then my third wish really is that, I think there are interlinked characteristics across COVID and climate change, and thinking about the really big challenges of the future, perhaps a challenge that is even going to dwarf COVID-19. I think getting serious about the climate crisis, not going back to a business as usual kind of destructive investment pattern, and thinking, much more about behavioural change and some of the different investment patterns that we're going to need to see if we're really going to get serious about the climate and environmental issues very, very quickly.
Thanks, Kellie. Ian, 2021 is almost upon us. As far as the CBI is concerned, as far as you're concerned personally, what would you like to see change for the better next year?
Well, it's interesting because there are some positives to come out of the last 10 months. It's been a terrible time, but we've learned some good things. And what we've done, which we don't do terribly well in Wales on occasions, we've taken risks and we've shown a fair level of agility. And what I hope is we keep that after COVID, and we don't revert back to the sort of cautious way in which we do things on a general basis. And I think we've had to move quickly to deal with COVID, and maybe there are lessons to be learned there about how we move forward. So I'd really be keen to see that kept and built on. I think going back to Kellie and Alwen's point, it would be lovely to see a major energy project get off the ground in Wales at some point in the next 12 months. We've seen so many get so far and then fall at the last hurdle. I think I saw some, there's a project at the moment, Seawind, which is involving floating turbines apparently, and it looks quite exciting, and their plan is to bring it to Wales and create a supply line in Wales as well. So it would be great to see something like that happen. On Brexit, I can't go into 2021 without referencing Brexit, but somebody I know relatively well today told me that the deal is imminent, and we're all going to be pleasantly surprised that it's far more comprehensive than we expected. We're all expecting this really skinny deal, and their take on it was that there was this quite sophisticated deal in place, and these little things around the edges, around fishing, were causing problems right at the end. So I just hope that person knows what they're talking about, and that's spot on. And my final ask would be Swansea City promoted back to the Premiership. Sorry, that's a selfish one. Can't
argue with that. I thought when you said that you'd heard from somebody who'd heard something, I thought that's
no, this person
that Venezuelans had rigged the US election or something. That was a bizarre claim. They covered. But no, it's interesting. I mean, I've heard that as well, but let's wait and see. I mean, the whole thing's not done till it's done, I suppose. Well, Robert, you have the last word of the year. So from your perspective, Ian's mentioned Brexit there, and they need to get that, whatever it looks like, certainty at least in terms of what that might look like. But what do you want to see next year?
So all of the above, plus my 3. Doing the right thing in business, more responsible business. Number 2, a bit more talking Wales up at every opportunity and the assets and the things that we do well and can contribute. And 3rd, just a lot more kindness.
And on that note, I don't think we're going to add anything to
Carwyn, can I just quickly come in there?
Someone's going to do it. Ian, the very last
Sorry,
one.
sorry, I didn't want the last word, but it was interesting because to Robert's point about business reputation, there was a poll out yesterday by Porter Novelli and Opinion and the CBI that suggested that people's view of business has never been as positive as it's been over the last 12 months. So they've really viewed what business has done over the last 12 months positively and business reputation, and that's with the general public and with employers within workforces. So we're getting there, Robert. So maybe next year we can increase that level. So sorry.
And as I say, and let's be kind to each other along the way.
Well, I wasn't going to round off now, but I thought I'd round off with, well, you've been listening to a last word competition between the Institute and the Confederation of British Industry. But my very warm thanks to my focus today. Alwen, Nadolig Llawen, a blwyddyn newydd dda.
Diolch Carwyn, Nadolig Llawen.
Kellie, a very Merry Christmas to you and a Happy New Year. Ian, yourself, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you.
Diolch yn fawr, Nadolig Llawen.
And the festively attired Robert. Have a good Christmas, Robert, and again, a Happy New Year to you as well.
Diolch yn fawr, and to you and everybody who's watching and listening today as well. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Business News Wales Weekly Business Review with me, Carwyn Jones. Join me again next year when we look at all the issues that are affecting business in Wales as we look forward to 2021. In the meantime, have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And of course, stay safe.